are you in the right relationship? Or are you wasting the most valuable resource that you have? Time. In this video, I want to show you how to recognize long-term potential as quickly as possible so you can stop investing in the wrong relationships and save yourself months or even years of your life. I used to think finding the right partner was about chemistry or compatibility, but it's not really about those things. It's much more nuanced than that. Because while the spark is an important part of it, the spark just gets the fire started. What you need is somebody that you can actually tend to the fire with. Now, I see a lot of people getting stuck in either fixation on the spark or chemistry or fixation on perfectionism. Like, do they check all of my boxes? Spoiler alert, it's not gonna happen. This person is the flaw finder who ultimately leaves every relationship because something is just off. So instead of fixating on chemistry or shared interests, these are 7 green flags to look for when choosing a life partner. And you don't need all of them except for number 7. So if you enjoy spending time with them, you are moderately attracted to them, and they have multiple of these characteristics, that's a really good sign. Now, I'm going to group these 7 characteristics into 3 categories: self-boundaries and self-trust, emotional awareness and reflectiveness, and emotional maturity and repair capacity. Starting with self-boundaries and self-trust, the first characteristic is they say no to the people they love. This indicates that they have a really strong sense of self, that their worth isn't dictated on validation from other people. They're not afraid to say no. What this means is that they're not likely to lose themselves in the relationship with you. They're not going to trade their authenticity for attachment because they know who they are. They know where they stand. They know how to take care of themselves. And that's going to challenge you to grow. That's going to challenge you to set boundaries and respect boundaries. Someone who can say no, someone who has boundaries, is like a house with doors instead of porous walls, right? They can choose to close the doors and protect the sanctuary. But a house with porous walls is always risking collapse. The second characteristic is their actions match their words. And this one is huge. It's about reliability. They do what they say they're going to do. This allows your nervous system to relax because you can trust them as a teammate, as a partner, right? Your teamwork is exceptional. You ask them if they can, pick up the kids, if they can meet you somewhere, if they can do a certain chore, pay the bill, whatever. Like, you know that it's going to happen. You don't have to check in on them and make sure that you don't have to micromanage them. They respect your time. They respect your partnership. And, like the greatest teams in sports, for example, have this level of trust with one another. They may not always like each other, but they can depend on one another to do the work, to show up, to do the job. These are the greatest teams. Same goes for your relationship, except you do need to like each other. Moving to the second category, emotional awareness and reflectiveness. The third characteristic to look for is that they are curious. They don't make assumptions, because you know what they say about people who assume. I don't even need to tell you. This one's so important because assumptions kill relationships. When your partner is curious, instead of reacting, instead of getting defensive, this says a lot about your ability to navigate conflict in the future when you inevitably start to have more conflict. When they want to know why you feel the way that you feel, what drives your behaviors, when they're listening to listen and not listening to speak, when they ask follow-up questions. Because so often I see communications breakdown, couples getting into like repeating patterns of conflict because somebody makes an assumption. Oftentimes both people make an assumption about what the other person is feeling, what was driving their behavior, what was their intention, instead of just getting really curious about why they did what they did or why they said what they did, instead of making it mean something about you immediately. if they notice that tendency to jump to conclusions, but instead pause and choose a more curious response instead of reacting, your relationship can absolutely can go the distance for sure. And in the beginning, before you start having conflict, this is going to look like somebody who's really curious about your inner world, who's really patient, who wants to know a lot about you. The fourth characteristic, they practice self-acceptance. Somebody who practices self-acceptance usually means that they are somewhat intentional about their own healing. Somebody who doesn't have any sort of like self-reflective practice, whether that's like therapy, coaching, yoga, journaling, meditation, whatever, oftentimes aren't going to be that accepting of themselves. They're not going to be like, they're not even going to be aware of this happening. And the reason why we want to be with somebody who practices self-acceptance, even if they're imperfect, because all of us are, all of us have a judge or a critic, but somebody who's practicing accepting all parts of themselves has built the muscle to accept all parts of you. And that's going to feed into how curious they are of an individual and their desire to really understand you at your core and love all of you. And for the final category, emotional maturity and repair capacity, the fifth characteristic is they love their ex. Now, before you protest, what I mean by this is not that they're in love with their ex, but that they have a lot of love for their ex. This is such a green flag because it shows that they have likely done the work to process their grief and let go of the relationship, and that they're able to hold nuance and they don't split people into black, white, villain, hero, good, bad. That even if the relationship was rocky or there was a lot of pain, that they're able to recognize that they're still a beautiful, wonderful person, and then they were with them for a reason, right? And so that it's not necessarily that they're pining for this person or hoping to get back together, but that they're able to hold love for them from afar and wish them well. This says a lot about, the regard with which they hold people that they care about, their ability to let go of anger, process hurt feelings, their likelihood or lack thereof to hold grudges. And that says a lot about how they're going to treat you and hold you no matter what happens in your relationship. They don't burn bridges just to prove that they crossed them. Number 6, they don't show you how they feel. They tell you. And what I mean by this is not necessarily that they're a robot that has no emotions. Right? That would be a bit of a red flag, but more so that they actually do have feelings, but they're not ruled or consumed by them, that they're not reactive, that they have the ability to regulate their own emotions and inner landscape, that they're able to connect the dots between what they're feeling now and what needs are not getting met, what drove them to feel this way, so that then they can articulate that to you, so they can communicate what they need without pointing fingers, without blaming. This is like them handing you the translation instead of expecting you to be able to decode the signal. And this is massive for contributing to the safety of the relationship and modeling secure repair, which leads us to number 7. This one is the most important one. This is actually the only quality that's actually necessary for a relationship to thrive in the long term. And that is they are willing to repair. Right? This comes down to something called the generative drive. Someone's willingness to get to know, to make better, and to repair. Because without this, conflicts will just drive you apart. Conflicts will wear on your relationship, and conflict is absolutely inevitable. Like, I don't care how healthy or how resonant and like soulmatey your relationship is. If you are different people, which I hope you are, I hope you're not dating someone exactly like you, because that would be boring, and that's probably not destined to last in and of itself, because you need differences to give you texture and flavor in your life. So assuming that you are two different people, you are going to come into conflicts, and you have to be able to repair that. Like, there will be seasons in your life that you'll hit rough patches, that it'll be a little bit slower, that intimacy might drag a little bit, that your needs will conflict with one another, that your vision for how to spend that season may be at odds. And then naturally, you'll probably butt heads and annoy each other at times as you unite your lives together. Both of you have to be equally willing to initiate and take ownership and say, hey, I'm sorry for how I reacted or what I said. I understand how that impacted you. And everyone might be a little bit different. There's no set timeline on willingness to repair, but they're at least not running from it, trying to sweep it under the rug or pretend it didn't happen and just like, put it in the rearview mirror. They're always willing to come back, and they're willing to ultimately repair without just shutting you out or icing you out or putting you in the dark in the meantime. You need to be able to repair. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to traverse the inevitable rough seas that will arise as you're sailing the ocean together. Now, these are the 7 characteristics to look for when choosing a life partner. And notice that they had nothing to do with shared interests, compatibility, chemistry, and everything to do with character. Because interests can change. You will evolve as a human. And character, sure, it can change too, but it's a lot harder. If somebody has different interests but has these fundamental characteristics in who they are as a human being, that is the sort of potential to hold out for. And you don't need someone with all 7 of these characteristics. With exception to number 7, they have to have that. If they have 4 of the 7, that's a relationship that can stand the test of time.